Let's be real. December in HR is no joke. I'm exhausted. Anybody else? Yeah, it's for at least for me, it's open enrollment, it's performance review season, it's merit process season. It's just a crazy time with so many things. Plus, like some of the weeks are short, like between November and December, certainly. But then, like, you get toward the end of December and like you don't have that many days left. And it's like, how do you get all this stuff done? Juggling your team's needs with payroll hours, tracking timesheets while wrapping up the year and preparing for next year. It's just a lot, all with a tech stack that's held together with spreadsheets and a ton of hope. Well, depending, right? But this is where ultimately Intuit QuickBooks Payroll comes in. You might think that QuickBooks is just for accounting, but let me tell you, it's so much more than that. QuickBooks Payroll is your business management control center that connects payroll, time tracking, HR, and finance in one powerful platform. It breaks down silos, reduces errors, and improves collaboration, all without adding complexity or forcing you to switch systems. Thank you, QuickBooks Payroll, for saving us. QuickBooks Payroll gives you clarity, control, and confidence to do your job smarter and faster so you can spend less time chasing down data and more time supporting your team. I personally love that QuickBooks Payroll integrates with everything. Integration, AI, and automation handle all of the heavy lifting, giving you nearly 4 hours back a week. And frankly, if you think about that, imagine what you could do with 4 more hours every week. Just think about it. Let your mind go to that magical place. So, if you're ready to stop surviving and start thriving in the new year, make the switch to QuickBooks Payroll now. Learn more by going to quickbooks.com/payroll. That's quickbooks.com/payroll. Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Traci Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. With me today, I have an esteemed guest, Emily Erstad. And before I go into her bio, I just want to tell you that the theme of today is going to really focus on reminding you that it's not that deep. And we'll talk about what that means, especially to Emily. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Emily. She is a multi-passionate indie author, strategic leader, and soulful coach, guiding others to live and lead with intention, clarity, and heart. As the author of It's Not That Deep, see where we're going with this, she explores the intersections of emotion, identity, growth, and leadership through a deeply human lens. With a master's in speech language pathology and years of experience in therapy, healthcare leadership, and operations strategy, Emily brings both clinical insight and heart-centered leadership to her work. She currently serves as a regional operations strategist and executive director in the hospice space, where she leads with empathy and vision. A trusted voice in soulful leadership, Emily blends emotional intelligence with strategic thinking to inspire others to lead from within. Whether coaching emerging leaders, writing words that resonate, or curating grounded spaces for growth, her presence invites honesty, depth, and transformation. Emily, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Of course. Oh, I'm really excited. We were just talking before we started recording about all of the things that help us to really understand what "it's not that deep" actually means. And so we'll keep that same energy and passion for this subject. And maybe first you can tell the listeners what inspired you to write your book, It's Not That Deep. And you are a prolific writer at this point. But I'm curious to know, where all of that started.
Yeah, so I'm a really deep thinker, deep feeler, always have been. It's consumed most of my life. So I feel like when I got to the point to write this book, I had reached this point of inner peace and just really knowing who I was as a leader and knowing that like it is that deep, right? Like it's an oxymoron, it is that deep, but you get to choose when it doesn't have to be. And you get to give yourself permission to take a step back, take a breath, gain perspective, and use these emotions as a tool to move you forward instead of keeping you stuck in this loop, in a cycle that can be really draining and put your energy in a place that you probably never had intention to put it.
That loop
Mhm.
is It's interesting. It's like you could be on like a positive cycle where you're like, "Oh, yeah," like this self-fulfilling prophecy. People are telling you exactly the same things you're feeling. Like we all have those friends that we vent to, right? And we're like, stressed about work or whatever's going on in life, and then we're validated in those feelings, and we're on this like positive, quote unquote, positive loop, which actually ends up being a little negative. And
Yeah.
then there's also this negative side to the loop, which is kind of somewhat the positive loop also, where you just are not getting off of that hamster wheel, and
Mhm.
you're just constantly living in that place of feeling like everything is so deep and so intense and so, just too much.
Sure.
And so I think it's interesting that when we think about it's not that deep in relation to HR or business, it's actually quite helpful to keep things in perspective that, like, okay, it doesn't have to be that deep actually. Like we can take a step away. We can leave parts of our job at home, or
Mhm.
at work, I should say, and not bring them home.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think the further you go in your career, the harder it is to do that, for sure, right?
Well, for sure. I think we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about depth, we talk about vulnerability, all these things, and they're so valid, right? Like we have to be able to experience and have these experiences to understand them fully. And so I don't think it's reckless to have those moments, because if you don't experience it, it's one of those things, like if you don't live it, you would never know, right? I think it's just knowing when those transition periods hit and you're not supposed to stay there anymore. And I always talk about in my book, the doom loop, right? Like exactly what you're talking about, where it's like a hurricane comes in, you know what's coming, it's going to leave destruction in its wake. It's so predictable, yet we still keep doing it and then wonder why we're stuck in this, right? It's insanity to do the same thing and expect a different result. And I think, especially for these deep feelers, deep thinkers, there is so much value in that, right? Like it is such a gift to be able to have that emotional depth, to connect in that way, but it can become so destructive. So I think we sometimes have this spectrum, and you'll watch it happen all over the place: LinkedIn, professional work environments, social media, of people moving back and forth on the spectrum. And you're like, okay, you almost had me, and now we're going too far. We're beating that dead horse, right? And we do it with our friends, we do it in our personal lives. I think it's cathartic in some ways to do that, because you really need to get over it in some aspects. But when we're speaking in leadership contexts, like it gets to a point where, is this productive anymore? Is this helping you? Is this helping people around you? What's the intention behind it? And I think that's when we start really gaining that clarity of, actually, this isn't doing anything for me. It's actually fighting against me now. And I'm doing exactly what I don't want to do. And then I keep getting the same result because I'm doing the same thing, because I'm talking about the same thing, focusing on the same thing.
Right.
And so that depth is so important. Like, I don't want to negate that. So when I say it's not that deep, deep thinkers, deep feelers, whoever you are, people that have to deep dive into those scenarios, we need you, but we need you not to stay there. And we need you to take what you've learned and move society forward, you know?
Absolutely. Two things came to mind as you were talking through that. One is that I think we can all think of business leaders and potentially even ourselves when we think about people who do get stuck on certain things, whether it's a problem or an answer to something or direction that they're given. Like I've certainly gotten hung up on, being told to do X, Y, or Z when I wanted to do ABC,
Sure.
and that can be really difficult to overcome that like negative talk in your mind where you're like, why are people telling me to do this when I know that I should be doing that, and it doesn't make sense. And then you get into this, like, you almost feel like stuck in a rut.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my case, I end up getting this like fight or flight. I'm like, okay, am I going to stay here? Am I going to fight this through and I'm going to see it through, or am I going to leave? And it's like what I've had to do throughout my career is say, like, okay, hold on, just take a step back, deep
Mm-hmm.
breaths. Like, let's not jump 5 million steps ahead. Like, it's really not that deep. Not to overuse this statement, but it really resonates, I think, with me. So that was one thing that I thought about. And the second thing is that there's this phrase called like boiling the ocean. And when we think about work and business, and especially in HR, where there's so many things that we can work to resolve in business or help people with, there's always so much to do. And even outside of HR too, that it's like, okay, well, we don't have to boil the ocean. It doesn't have to be this like perfect solution right away. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something I've really struggled with personally in my career. And I've had to learn pretty quickly that it's just, you're going to go crazy if you try to find the perfection in your response or your action, rather than just saying, okay, I'm going to do like a little bit of this, and then over time I'm going to do a little bit more of this, and make those incremental changes instead of, again, boiling the ocean.
Totally. It's funny you say that because that's one of the chapters in the book where I talk about you can get really,
Love
you
that.
can get really perfectionist.
Not planned, by the
Oh,
way.
so organic. But you can totally get stuck on that your idea of perfection, and it can diminish you, right? And it can diminish
Yeah.
people around you because it's got to be this way, and then we're gonna beat, we're gonna do it again, and we're gonna enter that doom loop, and we're gonna diminish ourselves. Where if you just took the first step, and then gave people time to respond to you, you might be surprised with perspective gained. You might be surprised that actually I'm creating a momentum that moves past me. So I don't have to do it all by myself. That teamwork for people like HR, when you are that leader and you're setting that tone, it's really hard to get out of your own way sometimes and allow things to progress past you and then adjust as needed. There's no way, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if like at the rate technology is moving and the way that life is moving, you're not perfect is not going to happen. It's going to get really messy. It's gotten messy. I mean, look at the past 6 months and where we're headed.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. I think we react out of fear sometimes, but this is a great if you shift your perspective, it's a great learning opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity here to do better. There's opportunity to use tools to be better. We could act out of fear and do the doom loop about how things are changing and we hate that. Or we could say, well, it's going to change. Change is the only constant. Once you get comfortable with that, that conversation becomes a lot more productive. And it's not that I say neglect your past self, neglect all that. I'm saying use it, understand it, revisit it every once in a while because there's probably a lot of lessons to be learned, but then move forward. Don't just sit here and then pretend, it isn't that deep because you don't have to be drowning in that deep water all the time
Mm-hmm.
in your own chaos. Like, please don't do that to yourself. Like, this should feel like when you get that breath of fresh air, take that moment as a sign that you're moving forward. And it might not have been perfect, but you got here, right?
Right, right. And this is also really well positioned for the same type of mentality where it's like, let's not take ourselves so seriously.
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of that doom loop, as you put it, and the potentially negative self-talk and all of the, like, these very like intense emotions that we can feel when things aren't going the way that we want them to go, whether that's personally or professionally, frankly, a lot of it, I think, comes down to like, okay, well, how seriously are you taking yourself? Like,
Right.
is there an element to this where you can just say, I should probably just let this go?
Right.
And then you have a whole lot more peace in your life.
Well, and it's just because you're letting it go right now doesn't mean it can't happen in the future.
Right.
Like I think that's what's been really interesting for me because I think we get also stuck in this comparison, right? Of, well, they're doing it, so I should do it. And this person's had this luck, so why am I not doing, and then you start taking yourself seriously. What am I doing wrong? Blah, blah, blah. It might not be your time. Like I
Right.
think you're just taking this weight. You're putting too much pressure on yourself and you are important, but you're not that important. And
Right.
it's not to diminish your value, but it's, you're adding a lot of responsibility to yourself that's so unnecessary and it's just going to drive you nuts. And you being driven nuts is not productive. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, that can lead to other conversations like we were talking about earlier, where we do get caught up in our head and our stories and whatever's happening at home or work. And then we confabulate the two. And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes of your day turned into a 24-hour period that you hated forever. And then the 24 hours becomes a week of this negative spiral when it was probably just 5 minutes that if you had just taken a step back and said, okay, well, that's not going to work. Let's try this. It makes you a more dynamic leader. It builds your character. It builds your strength. And it really challenges your critical thinking. And I think as humans, we don't like to be challenged in that way because it's exhausting. And
Yeah.
sometimes you do need a break. Like you do need to take a step back, but don't back off a challenge because it wasn't what you wanted,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we
Mm-hmm.
were kind of talking about that too with like some people will then, because they're not getting what they're wanting, then they start bringing their personal life into it, right? And they're like, well, this happens all the time and it happens at home. And then you
Yeah. What
start
does
down
this say about
the
me?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
me. Do I not know what I'm doing? And I'm like, no, it's not, here I go. It's not that deep, dude. Just give it 5 minutes. Give me five
Right.
minutes. Like it's just not right this minute. And that doesn't mean no, you know? And so I think that's been a huge shift for me, especially as someone that is a high achiever and has these big goals and wants all these things. Like, just because it's not happening when you want it to happen doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. And it doesn't mean you should take an alternate route where it becomes this trauma dump of, oh, no, my gosh, this is so triggering and now everything's wrong. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, why are we going from one extreme to the other?
Yes. Yes, and trauma dumping was something that we were speaking about before we started
Yeah, that's why
recording, and we were getting
I'm getting.
fired up. I know, like, let's bring it back.
Yeah.
Um, you know, first of all, I just have to put it out there that the word trigger, triggering, is probably the most overused, inaccurately used word in our personal lexicons today, because there's, I don't know if it's social media or if it's, again, this like doom loop. People, because of the algorithms on social media, you're getting, you're a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're getting the algorithm that brick by brick we build, and like we joke about that, but
It's
actually, like,
serious. Yeah.
it's serious. Like, you are told exactly what you want to hear and what you want to see, and then the moment you get something that isn't that isn't fulfilling your self-fulfilling prophecy, that isn't validating you or what you believe or what you don't believe, then you're like, I'm triggered. It's like, are you though? Are you
Well,
really triggered?
do you know what
Do
that means? Because
you know
there's
what
some
that
people
means?
that have been through some stuff, and
Right.
I think it's interesting that you say that because you're right. Now we have these algorithms that feed us everything we want, which is getting kind of dangerous because we're so
Hmm.
adverse, opposing other views and other ideas and other, well, if this happened to this person, there's a beauty in it that I think that has happened. We're not so alone, right? Which is beautiful because nobody
Hmm.
wants to be alone and we're getting connection and
Hmm.
that's so great. But it's also programming us to be so intolerant to anything that we don't like. And so then we're triggered because we didn't like what you said. It's like, you're not triggered. You
Right.
disagree. You disagree.
Right.
That's
Right. And
okay.
that's okay. You can
Go
disagree,
for it.
actually. And you
Actually, let's
can,
talk about it. Like,
yeah, exactly.
let's have something
Exactly.
productive. Instead, it's like, well, I'm so triggered that I can't tolerate this, so I have to exit the scenario. Okay.
There's no
Well,
growth in that at all.
what are we doing, guys?
Hmm.
And it's so interesting because it's like this community we crave is now creating a culture of intolerance for each other. And we're like, or even unrealistic expectations.
Yes.
And so then it becomes, and I think it's so interesting because there are people, I think trauma comes in different forms for different people. And I think especially in HR and leadership, we deal with it a lot because when you hire people, you hire the whole person, right? You're not hiring Susie BOM, you're hiring
Right.
Susie that, has a whole life at home and all these other things, right? And so I said Susie and I just hired a BOM named
Oh,
Suzanne. So
that's so
sorry.
funny.
I'm so sorry, Suzanne. You're great. I love you. I'm not talking about you.
We'll go
But
Suzanne. We'll go
yeah,
Suzanne.
Suzanne, but you're really great. You're my fave. No kidding. But anyway, we have that happen, right? And so then it's like, even in leadership, like how do you differentiate? Like you want to validate these people. You want them to feel like this is a place that you can be your whole self in. But where's that boundary, right? And I think this is where if you're listening to this and you have found yourself in this position, great, learn from it. Like it's not bad that it happened. I think we've all done it a time or two. I can recall moments in my past career where I have shared too much to someone I probably shouldn't have shared to. And it just happens, right? That's fine. Just don't repeat the behavior or acknowledge it and learn from it and move forward. Don't think, well, my comfort is more important. I'm going to justify why it's important and negate your time and your leadership because what I'm doing is the most important. And I
Hmm.
think that's where we start to get that trauma dump is like almost like a strategy to avoid accountability. And
Mm.
that's where I'm like, oh, like I
Yeah.
can do hard things despite that. And I think that can also affect people that really have been through trauma. And like, let's not use this as a trend.
Right.
Let's not, and I'm not saying we shouldn't acknowledge that things are hard, but there's just this fine line. And I think as a society, we tend to jump like here, then here, then here. I'm like, okay, how about we
Yes.
just like mingle in the middle for a minute and acknowledge each other's experiences, acknowledge what we've been through, and then use it to move forward. Because I also think we also have gotten to this trauma dumping where people are like, well, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to be that person. Well, that's not productive either. So we just
Hmm.
need to have vulnerable conversations and build trust to be able to have, like, you have to have the relationship behind it to be able to share these things. I don't think trauma dumping is sharing hard things. I think trauma dumping is weaponizing your hard things with people that you don't have relationships with that probably don't know how to handle it because they're like, where did that came out of left field? You know,
Now what do I do with it?
now what do I
Yeah.
do? Because now it's getting really messy. And then it's messy for them too, because they're not really getting what they're wanting. And then you're like, well, as a leader, this is hairy because I don't want to get into this part of it because I'm not equipped to handle this conversation. And I think that was something, especially in healthcare, I work in hospice. So that happens a lot, a lot. And
I'm
it's one of
sure.
those things where like, it's okay to not, guys. Like, it's okay to say, you know what? I'm sorry you feel that way, but we're talking about this. And this is where we have to stay. This isn't neglecting your needs or your emotional intelligence or whatever. This is just right time, right place, you know? And
Mhm.
I think frequently when trauma dumping is real, it's not sharing your feelings. That is not trauma dumping. Trauma dumping to me, and you can correct me, is oversharing things that you probably haven't even told people that you're close to with because it just came out, and then doing it at the wrong place, wrong time, wrong audience with the wrong intention. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
what's your intention here? Is it to connect or is it to avoid? If it's to avoid,
Absolutely.
check yourself, you know?
Absolutely. I actually just did a quick search, and you are totally right. Trauma dumping is defined as or refers to the act of disclosing a significant amount of traumatic experiences to someone without considering the listener's capacity or emotional well being. It involves sharing intense and overwhelming details of a traumatic event in a rapid and unsolicited manner, excuse me. Now, obviously, we also tend to find people trauma dumping when they believe that they've gone through something traumatic. And by definition, maybe it's just like a hard thing that they went through and not necessarily something that would necessarily cause like post traumatic stress disorder. I'm obviously not an expert, but there are some things that we say this casually in our language all the time, that traumatized me. Like, I watch Real Housewives every single day. That is my decompression station. And it's like, that was a traumatizing episode, but it's like, not really.
No,
We just say it casually and loosely to be, kind of like to have some levity. But to your point, especially in the workplace, there are people who take their whatever they feel defines them from a work hardship, personal hardship, whatever it is, and they take that and they dump it on whoever they're speaking to. And something that it made me think of is like when unfortunately someone's being terminated for performance, let's say, right? And I always say when I coach leaders, I say, look, when you're terminating someone because of their performance, they earned their termination. Assuming, of course, that the business has gone through all of the objective things that they need to do to like support someone and help them to achieve what they need to achieve. Fine. We've done all of that. But then sometimes like people just don't work out and they don't perform. And business leaders have to make that decision. They work with HR to execute on that decision. And then you go into that meeting and the employee is like, I have a family, I have a mortgage. Like these are all things we all already know going into a termination. And they ultimately, kind of go through that same thing of trauma dumping. It's like, well, this has never happened to me before. I can't believe this. What's wrong with me? How could and it's like, to your point, it deflects accountability. And as I was saying, what I always share when I'm coaching leaders on getting ready to do something like that, when there is, a situation in that kind of circumstance, the person who is being terminated for performance in this case where they've failed to meet the expectations of their role in this example, that's their thing to own. That's their thing to be accountable for, because you don't do their job, I don't do their job, they do. And
mm,
so at some level, no matter how personal it is, because of course when you go from having an employment to not having employment, it is personal,
of course.
there has to be accountability there. And so I think that you made a really good point that when people are in this like vicious cycle of trauma dumping and being on a doom loop and like taking themselves way too seriously and like not being cognizant of the listener or the person, their audience, and how they feel in these situations, it's like, well, where is your ownership over your own stuff?
There is none. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
I actually have had a recent experience with that as well, where it's like, hey, we're setting expectations. Like, this is our first 30 days. And I'm watching these employees. It's been a very odd shift where it's like, then there's this casualness that's getting a little uncomfortable, where it's like they're commenting on things that probably shouldn't be commenting on. Like, I don't know if anybody else knows what I'm talking about. Or then they start bringing their home life into things
Hmm.
as you're trying to hold them accountable to something. Well, I didn't sleep last night. Well, I didn't. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, well, you have to sleep and you have to come to work. Like, these are the bare minimum things that we do as humans, right? And so it's like, of course, and I think a term I will use frequently is like, human to human, I have compassion for you. But as your boss, my job is to hold you accountable because you affect my entire team. So I know you're making this about you, but it really isn't about you at
Right.
all. And I think it's interesting because that's a question I got asked a lot. They're like, you're so interested in emotional intelligence. And it has kind of also been a buzzword, but it's like, it has a time and a place, man. And it doesn't justify everything. And we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but how are we utilizing these skills to recreate boundaries? I think we're in
Right.
this pivotal point of leadership where I'm so thankful that we're acknowledging the importance of emotion and how unrealistic it is to leave it at home. And that actually having emotions in the workplace doesn't make you weak, right?
Right.
Cool, we've gotten there, but that doesn't mean we stay here. It says now we say, so we know that emotions in the workplace are advantageous. We know bringing our whole selves to work and respecting our employees as whole people is important, right? What's next? How do we use what we've learned to level up and guide people that maybe don't have the skills that we have, or level ourselves up to handle difficult situations? Right? Like
Right.
that's the conversation we should be having. Like, we got it. It exists. Cool. We all have emotions. We know that's what makes us unique. Love that. Great. Okay, what's next? And I think that's where HR has had such a hard time since COVID, and like even being an
Mhm.
executive director, like how how hard it is to take people through their life and then build a team and having those like we don't talk about that piece of it enough, because that's what culture is,
Mhm.
right? Culture isn't pizza parties and birthdays. It's knowing when somebody's off and shooting them a text and saying, "Hey, do you need 5 minutes?" Like, it's just knowing your employees' limits, guiding them through that, but then also creating that boundary of, okay, we're going too far. And then if they keep crossing that boundary, holding them accountable to that and giving them the space that they need to deal with their stuff. That might mean that the place of employment they're in right now isn't working with their lifestyle. And you
Mhm.
might have to be the person that makes that choice for them, and they're not going to acknowledge that. I've had that happen a couple times too, where it's like repeat offense after repeat offense. And they're doing that, well, I can't, I'm sick and this and that. And I'm like, I get it, but that doesn't change the job, and that doesn't change my job to protect my team and have you here to support the team. And so at that point, I have to give you space. You're not acknowledging that. Let me acknowledge it for you. No hard feelings, but this is where we're at, and it's not personal for me.
Right.
It's not. It's the business. As a person, you're great. But in this role, it's just not working with your season of life. And that's cool. But we're not going to keep doing this doom loop. Because it also drains people that are in
Yeah.
high leadership roles. Like, we go home, like, what just happened?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, 1,000%. And this is where, and I've certainly spoken, I think, on the podcast about this, but definitely with HR leaders that I've trained before throughout my career, that there is a very distinct balance that we have to strike with empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, being an HR or being a people manager does not mean that you over empathize and that you are almost like sympathetic at that point, or that you empathize so much that you can't like function because you're making all of these almost like excuses for people because things come up and people
Sure.
will kind of see how much they can take generally.
Mhm.
Not always are people so advantageous, but it comes up. And the better leaders are with like having a balance between being empathetic and compassionate and still towing the line on like what is necessary, what is essential for the job, how we get that job done together as a team.
Yep.
I think that balance is really important, and it can be very hard to strike that balance at first because there's always this sense of I want people to like me, or this sense of I want to support people, or I feel really bad for this person because they're going through a lot, which is totally reasonable. And there's also still a job that needs to get done, and so it's like, how do we balance that? And I think over time, as people become more experienced in their careers, especially in HR, they learn when they over empathize and when they're potentially under empathizing, and how they can find that balance. And, I think that also employees generally feel more regulated when their leaders don't over empathize, when they have those boundaries and they have like a clear way forward, that it's like, okay, this is what I have to do. How do I take myself less seriously? How do I deal with my stuff and not put it on everyone else to deal with too?
Sure. Well, and then you start overthinking, right? Like, I do it all the time. Like, I'm gonna be really honest. Like, even pursuing like, more of my professional journey in my personal writing, because I still have a career. I'm like, okay, now I'm doing that too. That overthinking. You go home at night, you're like, did I say this right? Should I have said that? Will this be perceived this way? That is such a dangerous trap. And I think as a leader, and this is me speaking to myself, it's like we can learn a lot from just observing. and just giving ourselves some grace and creating that intentional space. We don't have to have the solutions all the time. We don't have to jump in full force all the time. We actually can give ourselves permission not to. These
Mhm.
people don't
Mhm.
own your life, your time. Everything you say and do does not reflect them, despite what they think. And so that has been a new chapter of my leadership where people feel so, because I am I'm a therapist first and then went into leadership. So I have this natural tendency to draw that out in people, but people will confuse your kindness for other things. And so when that starts to happen, don't change who you are. This is what I'm telling myself. Just have a stronger boundary that
Yeah.
I am kind and I love to be this person for you, but this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
This is where I'm at. This is where I need to be to protect my peace because I can't be the best version of myself if I'm diving into this with you and then the person down the street and then this person and that. Like, you can't be all things to all people, and you don't have to justify that. And it's okay to say no. It doesn't mean you're less than. It means that you value your sanity, and congratulations, because that took me a minute.
Right, right,
About,
right.
wow, I actually need to be sane to do this job, right? Because it's so
Yeah.
easy to hop in with them and be like, oh, we're really doing this, you know?
Yeah.
So just, I think, give yourself time to reflect and observe because there's a lot happening. And half the time when people come to you, they don't really know. They think they know, but they don't. So don't think you have to know because if they don't figure it out, have it figured out in their lives, it's not your job. It's not
Right.
your job. Your job is to create the boundary, right?
And this is going back to one of the things that you said earlier on. This is kind of like the principal takeaway, I think, for why vulnerability can help to build trust, because that vulnerability drives and showcases, I should say, authenticity in a
Yep.
person. And
Yep.
when the vulnerability is real and authentic, like, let's say you and I are talking and I'm on your team, and you share a story with me because it's relevant to whatever we're talking about, then it's like, oh, this is an opportunity for us to connect. This is an opportunity for me as your employee to share what I might be going through. Or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe someone comes to us as leaders and says, they say something like, I've been dealing with a lot recently. Like, I lost my apartment. I lost my house. Like, people go through a lot of terrible things in life, and then it's an opportunity for the leader to be like, wow, that must really, really be hard. Like, what is it that I can do to support you? Or it's like, an opportunity to say, you know, let's talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
how are you feeling right now? And is it going to help to get some of those feelings out so that
Sure.
we can then talk about, all of these other things that we're focused on at work? And I think that, again, reiterating your point that authenticity, vulnerability, and connection all help to build trust. And building trust, I think, is like the best way that leaders can spend their time. It's
Yeah.
what builds teams, it's what keeps teams retained, it's what keeps them happy and engaged and focused on that end goal. And then you can have some of these more real, maybe difficult conversations too, because there is that trust there.
And it makes hard conversations a lot more palpable, right?
Yeah,
Because
totally.
they know who you are. They know you're not coming for them. You're like, hey, I hear you. I understand you. I see you. Let me give you some feedback that's beneficial to you. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because it's going to help both of us.
Right.
It's growing me in my leadership and it's growing you in your space. And that takes a lot of that fear and that heaviness out of leadership. So, and I think when you do use vulnerability, I don't want to say as a tool because that's kind of what it is, a tool in some aspects. Don't use it to manipulate people, clearly.
Right.
We won't even get down that
It's
road,
a
but
strategy, I guess, because you can,
strategy
yeah,
because you can have
be
vulnerable
yourself.
conversations. Be yourself. You should be. Who else are you going to be? I don't expect you to be anyone else. But acknowledge the strength that has and use it with intention that is to build trust and have transparency where people see you. Use transparency first. Let people see who you are. Build that connection and then dive into those vulnerable conversations that build that trust. So it's productive and avoids that doom loop. And I think sometimes you hate to hear it, but it takes time to do those things,
Hmm.
right? And we want everything right now, and that's just not going to happen.
Hmm.
So I think patience and observation have gotten me a long way as someone that's a quick fixer. So that's kind of my intention with like writing the book and stuff, and has evolved in time since the year that I wrote it. So I'm continuing my writing journey, of course, but I think that's kind of what I'm saying isn't new. I think it's just using different language to identify what's going on in this specific time because I think self-help is always like, we'll use these strategies and you'll be fine. That's not true, right? I mean,
Mhm.
obviously some of it's true because there's a whole industry based around it. But my intention was to go into, let's take this raw, vulnerable emotion and talk about it and talk about how we use it to level up and how we gain knowledge about ourselves and our environment and use it as a tool to build really strong, empathetic, especially in healthcare and hospice. We have to be those
Sure,
people,
sure.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's awesome. And actually, I think it's the perfect opportunity to help the listeners understand where they can connect with you,
Yep.
potentially purchase and read your book,
Yeah.
which, by the way, has like my favorite cover ever. For anyone who is curious to know, when I first saw Emily's cover of It's Not That Deep, I was like, that's everything.
Yeah.
Um,
When
so
I got it,
kudos to
I got
you.
really excited. I loved it. Yeah, if you go to my website, it's eepublications.com. There's a link to my Instagram, LinkedIn, my email. I have links to my book on there. That's the easiest way. But if you hop on Amazon, you can also just search It's Not That Deep, and it's the first to pop up. But if you
Amazing.
do read it, my intention was to connect with you guys and gain perspective and really create a community of people that hear this and want to level up in their emotional intelligence and take that next step. So I would love if you guys reached out or joined my newsletter or bought the book, anything of that type. It's why I'm here. So
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emily. And of course, we'll have all of those links in the show notes for easy access. But I really appreciate the way that you kind of look at the world, and especially considering what you do and the industry that you're in, how you approach, what can be a very intense environment. And so thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing all of that.
thanks for having me. It was great.
Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.